Today's video does contain stories that do have subject matter that some viewers may be sensitive to, and as always, viewer discretion is advised. And if you have a story you want to send my way, just go to astheravendreams.com and click the button to do so, and of course, thank you. Hi. Me, my sister, and my mom have been trying to make sense of this for the past couple of hours, and the facts get less comforting the more we compare our experiences of that night. So, last Friday night, I, 17, male, was home alone while my family, besides my sister, who's 21, who was at work, stayed in their cabin a few kilometers away. I'm used to staying home, as this exact scenario is very common in the summertime, especially while I'm working and can't travel from the cabin and back. I'm not usually jumpy or afraid while home alone anymore, and I'm used to the odd creaks and settling noises of our old house. I was especially comforted by the fact that my sister's dog was also in the house with me that night, and most noises could be attributed to him. And if anything were to happen, he would act as a guard dog of sorts to alert me of anything odd. At the same time, however, he is the type of dog to bark at any noise or person walking past the door or window, so I'm used to hearing him bark or growl at night. Even so, this past Friday, the sound of his barks at nearly 12 a.m. were disconcerting, to say the least. Despite my comfort with staying home alone, I'm still terrified of the premise of a break-in or some other uninvited human interaction at midnight. I let him bark for a few seconds, telling myself it was just someone walking past our glass door in the adjacent hallway, and that he would quiet down once they passed. Needless to say, that is not what happened. He kept barking and growling for a few moments too long, and I finally got out of bed, I sleep in the basement, and walked upstairs to check it out. As I'd suspected, he was standing alert at the glass door. I was comforted for a moment until I walked over, ready to close the curtain and go back to sleep, and then saw the door open about 2 or 3 inches. I froze. I had let Bosco, the dog, out earlier that night, but I know that I closed the door. I have never left this door open. I'm a paranoid person with bad anxiety, especially concerning break-ins and the like, so I would never, while home alone, forget to close the door. I am 100% certain. But, at the time, I didn't let myself think about these facts or even acknowledge that I could not have left the door open, because I knew that it would send me into a spiral, possibly even an anxiety or panic attack, if I didn't explain this away. I closed and locked the door, double-checking that it was certainly locked. Using the flashlight on my phone, the lights were all off, I looked around the entire second floor of my 3-floor house, including closets and other reasonable hiding spots just to put my mind at ease. And upon finding nothing, I went back downstairs to my room. As I was down there, trying to push away the fear, I could hear Bosco walking around on the floor that doubles as my bedroom's roof. I thought I was overthinking it when it started to sound like human footsteps, accompanied by Bosco's footsteps. He walks around for about 10 minutes before I put in my earphones, and I talk myself down until I can fall asleep. At 2 a.m. that same night, my sister comes home from work. I woke up a few minutes before this to Bosco in the basement, which he never does. There's even a gate to stop him from getting in the basement, and he was whining at my bedroom door. When I got up to let him out, My sister walked in, and we let him out the front door rather than the glass patio door, letting him back in the same way. We talked for a while before I went back downstairs, and my sister went to the bathroom. I forgot about the door, busy with work for the next few days, and I forgot to mention it to anyone until tonight. My sister and mom were home with me for a movie night, while my dad and brothers stayed at the cabin. I remembered the door situation when we were picking out horror movies to watch. I was sharing it as a creepy, almost funny story before my sister spoke up, saying that same night, an hour or so after they got home, the door was open again. The same door that was locked from the inside and not opened since earlier that night. My stomach dropped, and I started shaking the second this was revealed. We first started trying to explain it away. Maybe she had let boss go out and forgot to close it, until we both recalled that we had used the front door. Then we were trying to justify a reason someone would break in to not steal anything, and proceed to stay for 2 hours before leaving. Ultimately, I realized that I quite possibly locked someone in the house with me, and then forced them to hide upstairs while I searched the second level of our house. Then this hypothetical person would be trapped up there knowing that this house, that appears empty with the rest of my family gone and all the lights off, was not empty. And there was a dog who would bark if they showed themselves again, alerting me to their presence. Then, when I was in the basement and my sister was in the bathroom, they ran out the glass door, which is timed perfectly to when they found the door open once more, much wider than when I found it, as though they were only in a hurry on the way out. Perhaps they left it open the first time for a quick escape, or to stop the loud sound of it meeting the doorframe. Either way, it ties together too perfectly for me to reasonably brush it off. I know that it's unlikely, especially with nothing missing, but in this small town, there have been many reports of break-ins with nothing missing, vandalized, or just breaking and enterings many, many times. So, it's not as unlikely as it may be in a bigger city. I can't make sense of this, and I'm kind of shaken up thinking of the possibility of someone being in my house while I was asleep, alone in the basement. There's a part of me that doesn't believe it, but I can't shake the too many coincidences that all tie together to make this as concerning as it is. So, part of this was what my mom had told me. The sleepwalking and breaking arm stuff, at least. My dad says he doesn't remember much of it besides sleepwalking, so I may not be 100% on those details. But the dreams are real. So, this was back in 1996-ish when I first started walking. I used to sleepwalk, as my parents called it. Even with sleeping in my crib, I would make my way out of it, and they would find me randomly around my grandparents' house. We lived in the same house as my grandparents, so it was them, my mom and dad, and my 3 other siblings. We lived in a smaller area, but not in a super secluded part. Well, at one point, I was found crying in my crib, and I had a broken or fractured arm. They couldn't figure out why or how it had happened. A couple of weeks later, it happened again. Same arm. But the cast was also broken and torn apart. Again, nothing came of it, and seeing how I was 2 to 3 years old, I couldn't really talk or explain it. However, I remember having the same dream over and over again. As I got older, I can't remember any other dreams while living at their house. I would wake up seeing a light outside my window, and it was so bright that it was blinding. I would try to hide at first, but it would get so intense that I would leave my room, and the light would follow through each window or whatever room I was in. Eventually, I would make my way to the front door and I would open it, and the light would be gone. I'd start feeling afraid, so I would run to my trampoline, which was in the middle of our yard, and I would hide under it and grab one of the legs. Suddenly, I would see the bright light again, but it was above me this time. I would look up, and I could make out 9 smaller lights in a circle, and then a giant one would light up and it would start to open. And then everything would go black, and that's all I can remember. I remember feeling so afraid. Even thinking back on it makes me start to panic, and I have to remind myself that I'm safe. But this went on for years, as well as the sleepwalking. My parents even installed a deadbolt and placed it where it was out of my reach, and I would still manage to open the door and walk outside. One night, they actually woke up to a horn blaring. I was in the middle of the road and was almost hit by a car, and they could not understand how I kept escaping. When we did finally move out of the house, the dreams suddenly stopped. Even now at 28, I haven't had that dream or any dreams about UFOs or aliens like that one. I used to chalk it up to just coincidence, until I told an old friend about it, who was way into aliens and such, and he told me that I was most likely abducted. Like I said though, I don't remember sleepwalking or breaking my arms or anything. I just remember the dreams, and it still scares me to think about it. Everyone loves a good movie once in a while. My friend and I, when we were 15, we weren't an exception. So, one warm summer evening, we set out to spend a night at the cinema. I studied in a town far away from my family, and I lived in a dorm just like my friend Anna. Unrelated, but later she became a police officer. The movie was a light rom-com, shopaholic. It was Anna's choice, and we enjoyed it. Despite being a tough and principled police officer, Anna has always been sentimental and romantic. Both of us had an easy laugh, and after the movie ended, as we were going past agitated, smartly dressed youth in the direction of our wretched dorm, we just couldn't stop laughing at some ridiculous random thing from the movie. Part of our way lay through a less populated area, which involved a small bridge, at one side of which were a set of houses on the hill and a restaurant, and on another, our college on the way to our dorms. By the time we reached the bridge, I was folded in two from laughing my ass off at Shopaholic's green scarf-related jokes, and neither my friend nor myself knew what we were really laughing at so hard. It was dark, and there was absolutely no one around, besides this old lady on the hill trying to lock her house, perching awkwardly on the side of the hill, and seemingly having a hard time adjusting something. Being a very considerate and sensitive person, I remember thinking, hopefully she doesn't assume we're laughing at her, as I was almost touching the asphalt with my face covered with tears of joy, and letting everyone in a range of a few kilometers know that some of this stuff was funny. We stopped there for a minute so I could compose myself, and then we moved on. A little ways further, seconds later, already on the bridge, I felt compelled to look behind me. And to my amazement, there was that old lady just a couple of steps away, walking in an energized manner. It was absolutely impossible for her to go down the hill in split seconds and reach us on the bridge, especially considering how slow and awkward she looked before. Something seriously astonished me, though. I will never forget that look of hatred that she had staring directly at me as I looked back. We were only divided by a couple of steps, and it felt too intimate because there literally was no one else on the streets. Then, what I saw in her hands, I absolutely could not believe. Much to my horror, she was holding a large butcher's knife. I'm not sure whether I should count on my eyes or not, so I told my friend Anna to look back, and after a couple of endless moments, she said that she saw the gigantic knife too. At this instant, we stepped up, and whatever we did, we could not lose the old lady. The streets looked empty and unwelcoming, and not even cars went by, and the yellow illumination seemed cold, cruel, and somewhat dead. We hastily crossed one of the roads in the direction of our dorm, but still had to make quite a few turns. And on passing the first one, going around the corner of a little store, we felt free to run. I guess we didn't want to provoke her earlier, as I am a slow runner. To our amazement, the old hag was easily gaining on us just by walking. It felt like we were escaping a supernaturally unstoppable Jason Voorhees. Later, I explained it through the phenomenon of people in psychosis. They're often 10 times stronger and maybe faster than ordinary people because they lose psychological breaks. Seeing her follow us turn by turn in completely dark blocks near our dorm left no room for the feeble hope that she was just going about her business. Panting and scared, we reached the dorm safely, and I immediately shared the story with my roommates, while having a hard time believing that I didn't imagine it. And even to this very day, it does not look credulous to my own mind. Maybe because of complete irrationality of the crazy old bat's actions. I sometimes remember her whenever I become hateful or resentful, because it takes a very unhappy and defeated person to go after teens with a knife just over them laughing. The moral is, at night, by any means, travel in larger groups, and don't forget a bear spray or something. And please, have a safe time when visiting your local cinemas. Me and my friend, both 17, were on holiday at a resort in Norwich, which was situated in a pretty large forest. I'd been there once before, about 5 or so years ago, and on that trip I discovered a small dirt path that led into uninhabited parts of the woods. I was too scared to go very far down it when I first discovered it, and I sort of forgot about it. Fast forward to about 3 days ago, me and my friend are bored and have like an hour to kill. It's about 9 at this point, and I decide that it would be fun to go on an evening cycle in the woods. My friend is a very skeptical and logical person who isn't a fan of taking risks, so she needed some convincing. But eventually, we went. The path took us deep into the forest, so far that we could no longer see any of the lights from the houses around us. It also bordered some kind of field. However, this field was blocked off by tall metal fences that were topped with barbed wire. We decided to turn back after about 30 minutes of cycling because it was getting dark and we had no torches. When we returned, we were buzzing and decided that we had to do that again, but next time, explore more of the path. 2 days later, we decided it was a good time to explore more of the path. The sun was beginning to set, and it seemed like the perfect time to set off. We began cycling, however this time things felt a bit different. My friend was getting quite antsy, and further down the path we went, and even I began to get a bit freaked out. Something feels wrong, but we decide to carry on. Eventually we come to an unexplored area. By this point night had fallen and it was pitch black, and we come across some kind of wooden electricity box. We stared at it for a second. I tried to see what was inside, but decided it was futile, and we carried on. As soon as we passed that box, the off feeling became much worse, and I came to a stop. I asked my friend if we should play some music from a well-known TV show that we both like, as the soundtrack would match the vibe of biking through unknown woods at night. You can probably guess what TV show it is, but anyways, she says yes. So I begin to try to get the music up on my Spotify. I had no signal, but that shouldn't have been an issue since I had the album downloaded. But it just would not load. I was very absorbed in trying to get it to work, but after a minute my friend says in a nervous voice, "Is that coming from your phone?" Confused, I go silent, and then I hear it too. I can very faintly hear a song playing. The song is one that recently blew up because it was used on the TV show, and not only that, but the part of the song that is playing is the chorus, which is not at the start of the song. Me and my friend both check our phones, but neither are playing anything. We both then book it back on our bikes. When we reach the edge of the woods, we both feel the bad vibes wash away instantly. When we got home, we both immediately checked if there was any possible way the music had come from our phones. We both asked our Siris to play that album, but they both said, "I need you to give me access to your Spotify," or something like that. We also checked multiple other things, but nothing gave us an answer. We were both thoroughly freaked out, especially my friend, who was a skeptic, and always disproved the many ghost stories and horror movies that I would tell her about. I'm a big horror fan. We went back to the path the next day, and even went back to the exact spot, and the vibes were completely gone, and we could find no trace that any other person had been there. Also, some additional information. It was about 9:30ish when we heard the music. It was completely dark out, so if someone was there, we wouldn't have been able to see them. However, we probably would have heard the footsteps. The resort itself is close to an RAF base of some kind. The music itself sounded quite reverby, and it stopped pretty much as soon as we began booking it back, I think. And if anyone has any kind of explanation, scientific or paranormal, that would be awesome. We looked into folklore, etc., but we couldn't find any explanation of what it could be. This happened in April. My boyfriend had a business trip to a city 4 hours away from me, and I decided to visit him. We're in a long-distance relationship. Since my decision to visit was spontaneous, we couldn't book a hotel room in advance for the two of us, and the hotel room that my boyfriend was staying at was being paid for by his company, and they had a policy for not allowing guests to stay over or visit. So, we had to look for a new hotel at night. And since it was a popular area, all the hotels were booked except for one. It was an okay-looking 2 or 3 star hotel, but I was okay with staying there because we had no other options, and it was a safe area. Plus, my boyfriend is a tough guy, so I wasn't worried about anything. We got checked in, and the atmosphere of the hotel was, well, strange. I couldn't see a single woman there except for me. I didn't really care about it that much, because I was happy about being with my man after so long. We were staying there for 3 nights and 2 days, but my boyfriend had to leave at 7 in the morning, and he would return late night by 12 a.m., and there wasn't anything we could do because he's a senior director and writer who had to manage the shoots. So, On the third day, my boyfriend was off to work and I was taking a nap in the afternoon. I dreamt that I was alone in the hotel room, and some hotel staff dude came in to deliver breakfast and started to pull me off of the bed by my legs. I immediately woke up and got a little freaked out because I was all alone, and there weren't any other women in this hotel that I had seen. I calmed myself down and I watched some television. 2 hours later, around 6 p.m., I was ready to get into the shower because my boyfriend and I were going to the beach for a date night. He was going to directly pick me up, but I was procrastinating and postponing my shower. This is when the lock beep thing on the room's door starts to go off. It's when you try to open the room with a key card. I was startled, and I could not move as this man opens the door and walks in and looks at me sitting on the bed. He stares at me up and down and then closes the door. I didn't understand what was going on. He closed the door and he rang the bell. I then opened the door and he had the most random explanation in the world. I was just checking whether the AC remote and TV remote were in the room. I was shook. I knew that he was lying. I ordered food and other stuff a few times that day, and the staff probably knew that my boyfriend left pretty early in the morning and wouldn't come back until late. They knew that I was alone all day long. I asked him, "How can you just barge into someone's room like that?" He then said, "I didn't know there was someone in here," which was another lie because they have a freaking register. I locked the room. It wouldn't be of any use because he had the master card, and I called my boyfriend. I was so thankful that I wasn't naked. I don't know what could have happened. I told him everything, and he immediately came over to get me, and he screwed the hotel staff up. My boyfriend is in the news media, so he threatened to expose their behavior. They apologized and said they would give us a $6.28 discount. He told him to screw off, and while we were leaving, the man/manager who barged into my room gave me the most creepy look ever. The strangest thing is how this incident happened exactly 2 hours after I dreamt of the same thing. There was also some urine in the bathroom pot that same day. It couldn't be me because I was sleeping, and no one would use it except for me. I couldn't figure out who had used it and didn't flush. I asked my boyfriend whether it was him, and he just said it wasn't him. Thinking about this and the dream part, it really creeps me out to this day. Thank God I was saved. This happened last night. So, I work at a small coffee stand with only a drive-through window and a walk-up window in a sketchy area. On the closing shift, we only have 2 people working. So it was me, 22, female, and my coworker, 19, female. Around 10 p.m., this woman comes up to the walk-up window with a little dog, and she asks if she can sit on our bench outside. We tell her sure, and she goes and sits down. About 10 minutes later, she comes back up and knocks on the window. She's looking visibly distressed and has tears running down her face. She tells us that she lives in a big city about 4 hours away, and that she totaled her car nearby, and asks if one of us can give her a ride to a large bus station about 20 minutes away. My coworker and I believe her story, but don't feel comfortable giving a stranger a ride. We tell her that we can't just clock off and leave in the middle of our shift, and she asks us how much longer we have to go. My coworker lies and says 2 hours. It was really only like 45 minutes, in hopes that she will figure something out on her own or move on. She goes back to the bench to sit down. After 10 or 15 minutes pass, she comes knocking again, asking a second time for a ride, saying that she doesn't feel safe in the area alone at night. She says that she tried to get an Uber, but that she only has cash, and they wouldn't let her pay with cash. I tell her that she could call a cab and pay with cash. She says they're pretty expensive. At this point, we get worried that she's going to hang around until we lock up and leave. I text my friend who's on shift as a cop in the city, asking if there's any way we could safely help her get out of the area. He gets another officer on shift to drive out and offer her a ride. He tells me not to promise her anyone is coming, as he isn't sure how long it'll take his buddy to get there, or if he'll get dispatched to a bigger call along the way. About 5 minutes before close, she knocks again and asks for a ride. I tell her we're trying to work it out if an officer can escort her, but that I'm not sure if they can come yet or not, as they are really short-staffed in our city. I also tell her that, worst case scenario, there's a city bus stop about 1 block down the street. She seems hopeful about the cop possibly coming, and then returns to the bench. It hits 11 p.m., and we close and lock the windows. She comes up again and asks if I can just call her a cab. This is odd to me because she said she was trying to call herself an Uber earlier, so I'm not sure why she couldn't use her own phone. I call a cab. I tell them our coffee shop's address, and that the woman needs a ride to the large bus station downtown. The cab dispatcher tells me that that bus station got turned into a homeless shelter, but that they can drop her off at one of the bus stations for that bus line. I go back to the window and tell the woman the cab is on the way. She asks how much the cab would be. I tell her that they didn't say, and then I ask her how much she had. She didn't respond. I gave her some water, a snack from my bag, and a treat for her dog, and we finish up our closing chores. We go to leave, and we set the alarm and lock the door. We hear her knocking at the window again, but then she walks over to us at the door. She seems really scared, and she asks if we're leaving. I tell her that we have to go, but that the cab will be here soon and that she'll be okay. She says she doesn't feel safe, and she points out a white truck parked on the street next to us with its lights on. She says there's someone in the car and that she doesn't feel safe waiting alone. I reassure her that she will be okay, and I remind her that she has her phone and can call the police if she still feels unsafe. My coworker and I get into my car. I was giving her a ride home because her boyfriend was late to pick her up, and we discuss what to do next. We felt sympathy for her and believed her, but we also didn't know if she was associated with whoever was in that truck or not. If we sit in my car in the lot and wait for the cab to come, she'll likely start coming up to us at my car. Neither of us had bad gut feelings, but the situation was sketchy, and we didn't really want to take any chances. We left and decided to circle the block to see if she would stay there, leave, or get in the truck. When we get back around the block, she's gone. I turn to start driving my coworker home, and we see her sitting outside of the gas station. I'm not sure if she ever went back to get the cab or not. I wonder if she decided to wait there to ask people getting gas for a ride, or if she was trying to get away from the person in the truck that she was creeped out by. I felt really bad for her situation, and guilty that I couldn't do more to help her. But I feel like anything else I could have done would not have been safe to do. My friend, the cop, reminded me that you never know what people's intentions are or not, and that at the end of the day, she's an adult, and she'll figure something out. quick heads up, I don't normally do this, but this story does contain mentions of sexual assault. So just an FYI, if you can't or don't want to listen to that, then I would suggest skipping the story. This happened a few years ago. We had just moved to a new city, and I was about 11 at the time. There weren't any bus routes that came near where I lived, so my mom had to pick me up from school every day and take me in the mornings. The place we lived at the time wasn't the best. I live with my brother now, and things are much safer. We had a lot of gang activity, kidnappings, assaults, etc. In our city, I was also one of the very few white girls. This is relevant because I got a lot of attention for being a petite, short for my age, white, blonde girl with blue eyes from classmates and other adults. Mostly a lot of sexual harassment. But for this specific scenario, my mom didn't want to have to drive all the way to the school to get me because it was too busy with other parents picking up their kids. So, she wanted me to walk to a local gas station and wait for her to pick me up from there. We did this for a little while. One of those days, I was waiting out front of the gas station waiting for my mom to come and get me. I never really felt safe, so I always stood with my back against the wall and watched the people while they got gas. Most of the time, nobody ever bothered me. They had places to be. But one time, this adult man walked up to me and asked me if I wanted a ride home. I was so surprised and scared that he had come up to me like that. I didn't even hear what he had said. So I wanted to be polite. I laughed and just nodded. He looked really pleased and started motioning for me to come with him back to his car. At this point, I realized what he had asked, and I was getting really nervous because I didn't want to suddenly change my mind and just tell him no, but I also really didn't want to go with him. He noticed I wasn't following, and he told me to hurry up and come on. I told him that I actually didn't want to, and that I'd be okay because my mom should be here any minute. He then started to argue with me, and tell me that it was no trouble and that I should really go with him because I would get home faster. He even tried to tell me that if I went, he would stop and get me something to eat on the way home. I tried really hard to tell him I didn't want to go, but he kept insisting and he was starting to get closer. I didn't know if I should run inside the store or not, but I was too scared to go anywhere. Thankfully, before he could get too close to me, I saw my mom's car parked on the street where she usually waited. I didn't know how long she had been there, but I told him that my mom was here, and I ran to her car and got in. I told her what happened, and she told me that it was good that I didn't go with him, and that next time I should go into the store if someone bugs me like that. I remember seeing him get into his van while we were driving away, but I never saw him again. Although, about a week later, a kid from my school got into a van with someone, and they were actually missing for a few days. When they found them, they had been sexually assaulted and dumped on the side of the road somewhere, thankfully alive. All I could think about is that it must have been the same guy, and that could have been me. When I turned 18, me and two of my friends decided to take a trip to our local casino. We mostly just played simple games like slots and video roulette, since it was our first time going to a casino. After losing some money, we decided to search for something to eat. Pretty much everything was way too overpriced, so we wandered around for quite a bit. Eventually, we reached a hallway along the border of the main floor. We made our way down the hall looking for food, but everything was closed. we started to notice that the hall was completely vacant of people. As we wandered further down the hall, we reached an oddly intriguing small room through a double doorway. This was the only entrance into the room. It was completely empty, except for us three, and about 10 to 20 slot machines. We were bored, so I decided to throw $5 into the slot machine and spin a few times. After my second or third spin, an odd-looking man, early to mid-30s, appeared from behind the slot machine, seemingly out of thin air. He began watching me play and started getting uncomfortably close to us. We weren't very worried since we outnumbered this dude 3-1. However, we were confused. We grew more and more uneasy the longer he stood there, not saying a word. Eventually, my friend decided to ask him what was up. The man looked at us for a second before asking if we were all brothers. None of us looked even remotely similar, so we told him that we were all just friends. He said, "Oh, that's great," and proceeded to ask if he could join our group. We told him that we all came together and lied in saying that we were actually planning on leaving soon. He told us that we should stay and play with him, and then says, "My good friend Rachel over there knows all the good machines," and pointed towards the other side of the room. We slowly peered around the machine, and all became immediately horrified. Nobody else was in the room with us. He was pointing into an empty corner. We all stand up from our seats and slowly back out of the room, not letting our eyes leave this man. Once he was out of sight, we turned around and sprinted down the hallway back to the main game room. We all vowed to never go back down that hallway again, and I never did. But curiosity eventually got the better of us. About a year and too many casino trips later, we're playing blackjack back at the same casino with a fourth friend. He gets bored and hungry and says that we should look for food. After walking around looking for food, we made it back to the entrance of that very hallway that we vowed to never return to. The fourth friend said that we should search down there for food. The rest of us tell him no, and explain to him that we cannot go back down there. He asks why, so we tell him about our experience down that hallway 1 year prior. He said that we're BSing him, and that there's no room of slot machines in the location that we described. He explained that his mom was a worker at the casino, and he would know if there was a rogue room of slots in the middle of nowhere. So, we did the one thing we could do to convince him of our experience. We decided to lead him to the room. We made our way down the hallway in search of the room, but after walking for a few minutes, we reached the end of the hall. Confused, we turned around and searched again, thinking we had somehow missed it. There was no room. We came to the conclusion that they must have moved the machines out of the room, since the casino does change things around quite frequently, so people don't gain a sense of direction on the game floor. So, we once again walked down the hallway in search of an empty room, or at least a set of closed doors that would enter the room. Nothing. No doors. Not even remotely close to where we remembered the room. We were completely dumbfounded, and started to question our sanity. All three of us remembered the room in the same location, yet there was nothing. There was no room with slot machines. There was no room at all. To this day, neither me nor my friends understand or can explain how this happened. So, this happened a few years ago. I'm not exactly sure when, but I think I was around 13. I'm 16 now, and female. My cousin, who I'm really close with, had a basketball game at her school, so me and my mom went to go watch her play. We were sitting on the bleachers in the front, closest to the floor, and we're just watching the game. I remember looking up at one point at the bleachers, higher up, and seeing an old man, probably in his 50s. I'm not that good with ages. He was wearing a jacket, jeans, and orange-tinted sunglasses even though we were inside. I remember thinking it was a little weird that he wasn't sitting with anyone. In fact, he was actually kind of far away from everyone else. Not that there were very many people besides parents and siblings. I didn't really think much of it, thinking maybe he was a single father or something like that. The school was completely opened to pretty much anyone during the game. The doors to both the entrance and the gym were left open, so almost anyone could come and watch them play basketball. I made a small mental note of him, and I went back to watching my cousin play. I also thought that it was a little weird that he was pretty much the only person not cheering, or making any noise for that matter. He just kind of sat on the bleachers and watched the game, but I still ignored it. The game went on as normal. I think they lost, I don't really remember, but we still cheered her on and told her that she did well. After it was over, my cousin and the other girls went to change from their basketball uniforms in the locker room, while the parents and other friends or family waited in the hallways right next to the door leading to the parking lot. While we were waiting for her to change, I saw the same older guy with the orange sunglasses. I figured he might be waiting on his daughter, or even his granddaughter, but after a couple of minutes, he started acting weird. He would get really close to me without looking in my direction, and then walk back over to where he was before without looking again. He did this for a while, and I did my best to ignore it. I watched as the other families filed out with their kids, but every time a family passed by and exited through the door, he would follow them halfway, and then stop as they walked through the doors. He did this for probably about 10 minutes before he left through the doors without a word or another glance. He left by himself, so he couldn't have been waiting for anyone. He never checked a watch or phone or anything like that either, so it's not like he was worrying about time. I remember thinking it was weird and creepy back then, but I didn't really realize how creepy his behavior was until I told my mom about it after we left. She told me that I definitely should have told her, and to tell her if anything like that ever happens again. I think it creeped her out a bit too. He really creeped me out then. I got a bad vibe from him, and I remember shuffling closer to my mom whenever he got too close. He gave me a bad feeling, but I still wonder if I was overreacting. Maybe he was just a harmless guy who wanted to watch the game. I don't know. I'm hoping you guys will have some opinions or thoughts on it, and I think I might just be reading too much into it. So, I have memories when young of my sister and her sleepwalking episodes. Have you ever seen a person sleepwalk in front of you? The horrors. They basically look like an empty vessel, and kind of possessed. There is especially a core haunting memory of my sister sleepwalking one night. That evening, me and my mother were watching TV, and we stayed watching different shows late into the night when my sister decided to go to bed while we stayed awake. An hour or so after she left, she came out of her bedroom and went into my parents' bedroom, which my mom and I noticed and wondered why the hell she would go in there, especially with my dad asleep in the room. My dad has this black work suitcase for his paperwork that he took everywhere, and all of a sudden my sister came out of the room with that black suitcase and headed to the front door. My mom at this point knew that my sister was sleepwalking and shushed me, and we started following her steps without startling her. She was also saying things that we couldn't understand or hear properly. It sounded like when someone talks to themselves out loud. She got to the front door and started to unlock the door. I looked at my mom and saw that she was concerned at this point, but luckily, as my sister opened the door, she hit her head trying to open the door while she stood in front of it, because the door opens inward, not outward. My sister woke up at this point and looked all confused, as she was trying to figure out how she ended up by the front door with my dad's suit bag, and her head hurting. She really had no clue, and doesn't remember any of it. My mom took her to bed and eased her into sleeping again. I was freaked out, and I couldn't sleep that night. What if she was having a manic dream and decided to act on it while sleepwalking? That thought always terrified me. Luckily, as she got older, her sleepwalks stopped completely. However, to this day, she remembers none of it. So that was today's collection of creepy Reddit and subscriber stories. Stories from Redditors and subscribers that are both submitted to me or I've gotten from the True Scary Stories Reddits. Really, today's collection was a damn interesting one in my opinion. Some really bizarre stories this time around, and I think this was probably one of my favorite collections so far. Who is calling me? Sorry, that was my dad calling me. Back to recording the outro. Anyways, I think this was a fantastic collection in my opinion. Definitely some bizarre stories. And yeah. Thank you to everyone who let me use their stories, and those of you who submitted your stories to me. Genuinely appreciate it, because without you guys, this video wouldn't happen, right? So again, thank you. And of course, a huge thank you to everyone who listened to this point in the video. And if you didn't listen to this point in the video, well, you're missing out, I guess. If you liked the video, please hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't like it, you're free to hit the thumbs down button. That's your decision. If you're new to the channel and liked what you heard, please consider hitting the subscribe button. And of course, you can leave me a comment down below, just letting me know how you're doing, what's on your mind, played any good games lately, want to tell me about something like that, seen any good movies. I watched a couple movies on Pluto that weren't good. There's that. Yeah. Also, if you have any more questions for me to send to me to potentially enter yourself to win an As the Raven Dreams t-shirt, down below there's a link for my Ask Me Anything, which will be coming at the end of the year, so make sure you get your questions in now and enter yourself in that drawing. There may be more than just the 2 t-shirts. I may have more stuff to give away. I intend to have more stuff to give away, so don't think the t-shirts are the only thing you can win. There's going to be stuff for everybody, potentially. No, maybe not everybody. That's the wrong way to say that. Going to be stuff for a lot of people, potentially. How about that? Anyways, a huge thank you, again, to everyone who listened, and I hope you're all having a beautiful week and a beautiful day, and I will see you on the next video. But friends, until that happens, sleep well.